I'm showing up as an investor for the last 30 years and consulting for as many years, as well as coaching businesses for the last 15 years. And I started a mentoring program that we call Peers on Demand the last 5 years as a way to connect leaders with trusted advisors in group settings. And so this session in terms of team development really intrigued me. The speaker's talking about being competent, being able to have, as Susan said, the competence. And I think the character goes hand in hand, character and competence. I think maybe you should have character first before competence, but relationships is second, or how you like somebody is second. So I've always heard the term that you don't have to like somebody, but you have to respect them, that they're competent. And I've heard that term, and I think it applies here more because we're talking about getting set. And that's the example that he gave about the explorers. They liked each other. They were the best friends ever. And going in, they collapsed in a few weeks and completed the journey with somebody that was competent. And then they developed a relationship. Then they developed all those things. And to this day, I think they're best friends, whereas he never talked to the initial guy, Luke. So this is a flip. This is a change for my thought, because when he was giving the questions, I thought, oh, you got to like somebody. You got to get along with somebody to relate, to exchange at least values. And that's not what he's talking about. The get set is really what flipped for me. Now, get safe, which is the values or the vulnerability and liking, happens, but that's secondary, which is amazing or interesting to me. And I think that was an eye-opener to me. And when you combine those two, once you combine those two, then he's saying you get strong. Then you have the ability to work together, accountability, and then get success. That's the path. And he's talking from a practical standpoint, not an academian or academic standpoint. So my thought is to tend to trust this process. It probably depends on how critical the mission is. If it's save the company time, you really want the competent people to show up. If it's planning a party, you really want the relationship people to show up. But who cares about competence? The results are not that important. Maybe that's what I'm thinking, is how critical is the mission? How critical are the results? And I think when you put it in that perspective, those things show up. And I think very rarely do things come up real critical, but they do show up in a company, especially nowadays in the turbulent times that we're going through. People are getting laid off. And so there is some critical mission there. There's some incompetence that went on there, or at least they're trying to find the competence, and the relationship goes by the side. So putting that in perspective, I think trying to understand the value of what we're trying to accomplish. And I don't think everything has the same equal value. Like 10% of teams are committed, and that's the problem. Or to the effect of being committed, 10%. So we have maybe the 80-20 rule, 20% are effective and 80% are not. That's the problem. And how we've been approaching it is, how do we like somebody? How do we develop a relationship? How do we get along? How do we do this and that? And that's what he's talking about. It's the wrong approach. If you're going to go the distance, if you're going to be 100% committed, you have to first look at the cognitive, the competence, the readiness, and the plans that they have. That's a flip. That's a total shift of what I believe society or companies or teams believe in. It's what you believe first. You got to believe the competency. Then you like them. Then you develop trust. And it's a total shift of that equation that I've been understanding in the past. This is really shifting my mindset, certainly in terms of teams. This gives us clarity, because if the equation is correct, that 10 to 20% of teams are effective, then we're using the wrong model. How do we get to the 80% that are effective? And that's what I believe, that this model is 80% based on his book, based on his talk, based on the example that he gave. And yes, I think somebody mentioned earlier, how do they show up before I even listen to them? And so I'm building more and more trust in the process, even though it's completely different than what I've been raised with. In my mind, I think you could always teach or educate somebody in both areas, in emotional capacity and also competent capacity. Those are teachable things, even emotional things. It has a sense of purpose. How big is the purpose and the meaning of life? I think we can uncover that and get clarity about that. Sometimes there's not enough clarity, but if we can find meaning. Now, the competence is another thing. Competence takes time. That one, it just takes time. Learning takes time. It's a habit. It's a physical thing. So that you either have to have it or you don't. And in the situation that it was here, they don't have time to learn on the job. I think my first question would be, how important is this project? How really important? What is the balance? What do you stand to gain? What do you stand to lose? How important is it? If I can measure the magnitude of the project, that would give me some clarity and would also give everybody clarity. How important is this really? Are we willing to commit our life to that? Or is this just something that we're doing for a week or a month? And there may be a matter of factors, the time that's involved, the money that's involved, the resources that's involved. All of those, I think, are factors. How critical is the project would be my first question. It's not something that the speaker mentioned because the assumption was every project is important, but that's not necessarily true. So what's important now is that may not be important at all in 5 years because of the velocity that we have of changes. So here's what I look for is not how I find out how important the project is by asking the question, what would it mean to you for this to happen? What would it mean for the company for this to happen? What would it mean for the team for this to happen? Meaning is how I get some feedback about the value that somebody gives to that. And I don't judge on that. If they say, well, it really means a lot, it would change my life, that's still fluff. I can't go to the bank with that would mean a lot. I can't express it in terms of, it's not metric enough. I need to have something metric, and good or bad, how we measure things today is in dollars, is in money. And that's my second question. I know it would mean a lot to you. What would it mean to you if you were able to express it in dollars for yourself and express it in dollars for your company? When we're talking dollars, people pay attention. And the higher the dollars, then we can leverage. Oh, this would mean $100 to me. That's very different than this would mean 100 million to me. Totally different response in how I would gauge how important that value is. So let's talk the language of business. And the language of business, whether you like it or not, is still currency. And just get back to get set, get safe, get strong, get results. That completes it for me, and I feel good. And then I could dig deeper into it. Well, it's two approaches. And the question is, which approach is more effective? Do you have competence before you develop a relationship, or do you develop a relationship and then build up the competence later? And my contention is you could build up the relationships, the love, the kindness, all those skills much faster than you can the competence, than you can how physically we show up, or financially, or resourceful, or smart. That takes a long time. So it's giving me a lot of thought about this. For business, I'll go with competence first. For personal things, I'd probably go with relationships first.